Greetings, humans. We're moving into chapter 4, talking about consciousness. Now, I want you to remember agreement 2 from the very start of the term, that sometimes we have to get a little deeper into things so that when we're talking about what's in the book, we're not making mistakes and putting out false information by accident. So this is one of those times where we're gonna do kind of a dive into the concept of consciousness that we don't really do that much in the material. So this part of the lecture, don't expect a ton of like test questions about it, but try to get abstract with me and sink down into the concepts. So if I throw out the question, what is consciousness? You're going to get a couple of basic answers from people, like awareness. Consciousness is awareness of your surroundings, what's going on around you. Okay, good. Or it's self-awareness. And usually we would say sentience if we mean self-awareness. We're getting at that sort of fluffy, ineffable property of being a thing with, we don't want to say a thing with a soul, not in science. That's kind of what you mean, right? But self-awareness, knowledge of your own internal processes, and so forth. Sometimes we'll get the idea of moral reasoning. You're capable of moral reasoning, you're a sentient being, you have consciousness. Fine, I accept all that. The trouble is the rule in, rule out problem. Okay? Are you comfortable with the fact that tomato plants are aware of their environments? And lilies and anything with leaves really turns the leaves to track the path of the sun through the sky, and flowers open and close at the appropriate times. And plants have some level of self-awareness because they regulate their own body processes. Computers are for sure self-aware. Are you comfortable with computers being conscious? Google. Are you being Google stalked? I for sure am, and this is old news by now. I got one of these things. It's a fairly recent acquisition on my part, just in the last couple of 3 years. I used to help launch the GPS satellites, but I'd never ever used one until 2 or 3 years ago. Oh my God, it's such a relief. Take that cognitive load and outsource it onto the phone, right? I'm autistic. One of my symptoms is that I am always lost, even places I've been before, and having the phone. And again, the thing is that the GPS function routes through Google. So a couple of years ago, I started to notice that I'd wake up in the morning and I'd check the phone, as you do, and the phone goes, Jason, there's traffic on your way to work today. You might want to leave a little early. I'm like, hey, wait a second. I never told Google where I work or when I'm expected there. But Google has been tracking me around, even when I'm not using a map function or a GPS function. Other software has location enabled, and it knows where I am, and it just sort of extrapolates this is my work site and my work schedule, and then starts giving me unsolicited advice about when I should leave for work. Is that self-awareness? Well, your computer knows when its software is out of date, and it goes out on the internet, right? Usually at a really inconvenient time, goes out on the internet and grabs the updates that it needs to compare its databases with the server database and go, hey, this thing, go grab that thing and make a decision. Sorry. Do you like the dot test or the mark test? This is where you set up a mirror and then you put a child or a dog or a dolphin or whatever in front of the mirror, and you see how it acts. And then surreptitiously, you put a mark of some kind on its face. And you put it back in front of the mirror. And then if the organism touches its face, it looks at the mirror and sees the mark on the thing in the mirror's face, and it touches its own face, it recognizes it as the thing in the mirror, right? Babies can't do that. half of children at 18 months are able to, and by 24 months, it's more like 95% of children. Younger than that, they don't get it. Are they not cells? Are they not conscious? Um, Dogs don't pass the test. Cats don't pass the test. Elephants do, though. And some birds do. Like ravens eventually will get it. You know, the bigger brained corvids will get it eventually. Who else? The great apes generally pass as adults. Juvenile great apes have a really hard time with it. Elephants will pass. Are you comfortable with all these animals, but only these animals having consciousness? And here's a neat little video to sort of break down the mark test for you if you like that. Yeah, so what about the moral reasoning thing? Because, you know, other animals can reason abstractly. Other animals have language. Dolphins certainly do. Groundhogs, you know, prairie dogs have at least the components of language. You have a different cry for a predator on the ground, in the trees, and in the sky. You know, three different cries, and they can work out that if a younger prairie dog is giving a cry, it might not be competent yet. So if a young prairie dog screams "eagle," right, then they'll have an older prairie dog with them who will look, and if there is an eagle, repeat the cry, and then the other prairie dogs respond to that, right? So, you know, abstract reasoning and thinking things through, and moral reasoning specifically, which requires reasoning, which is why I bring it up, has basically three pillars. So you go through the world and you look at all of the major religious systems on earth: Christianity, Islam, Hindu, Sikh, Zoroastrian, right? Get into all the major things. They all have these big things in common: that you are to respect authority, you know, honor thy mother, thy father, and follow the rules and the commandments and so on. Empathy, that we feel how other people feel, you know, treat others how you would want to be treated. And then fairness, that God wouldn't punish people for no reason, and neither should you, right? These are the three big pillars of any moral system, and you can definitely find those in just about any mammal where you look hard enough. Okay, so authority, obviously, you can see the rank structure. Even reptiles and birds will have their pecking order, right? And you do what the big guy says. With a bunch of cheating that goes on around the outside, you know, when the boss isn't looking, you kind of do what you want and you sneak around. But when you get punished for that, you go like, that's right. You obey the authority. But here's some examples. Empathy in rats. Peggy Mason, she's really neat. You should read all of her stuff in the scientific journals. Here's like the quickest poll possible summations. This is not classed by YouTube. It's just the times that we're in. I have all this video for you to watch because honestly, the papers, you're not qualified to read them yet, and they're going to seem dreadfully, dreadfully dull. But this is all based on scientific papers. It's really great stuff. Peggy Mason, we might get into this again later. And anyway, watch the thing. Rats have empathy, absolutely, no question. This is Franz de Waal. He's more of a philosophic type, but fairness in capuchin monkeys and his capuchin monkey fairness study. Dogs also could get into the act here. Chimpanzees, absolutely, certainly. Elephants, yeah. So watch that. It's a couple minutes. It's really amusing. You'll like it. So the problem here is you want a definition of consciousness that will rule you in because you know that you are conscious. But it will rule everything else out because you know that, like, tomatoes and parakeets and computers are not conscious. You know, right? And you're trying to create the definition that fits the facts you already have. Science doesn't work that way. Okay. And there's some like moral reasoning in here, some moral philosophy that we absolutely have to dig into. So, what's the difference ultimately between a pig and a dog? If you were zooming around through space, you're from Venus or something, and you're a gaseous alien, whatever, I don't know. But you're zooming around through space and you stumble across the Earth, and like, that's interesting. Let's start sampling organisms. And you like beam a bunch of organisms up onto your ship so you can study them. And randomly you get a dog and you get a pig. From the outside, from the alien perspective, what's the difference? They're so similar that something very dissimilar from us might have a really hard time telling the difference. Like the shape of the tail on average, and the shape of the feet. You know, that's kind of ultimately that's kind of is that a good place to draw a line in speciation? Um, what are some words you'd use to describe a pig? Dirty, smelly, disgusting, stupid, mean. What are some words you'd use to describe a dog? Fluffy, cute, person's best friend, loyal, faithful. They're almost the same animal. Pigs in the wild aren't dirty. Pigs like to roll in mud. When kept in captivity, they like to roll in mud because we keep them outside and we breed them to be hairless. They have pink skin like me, and we breed them not to have thick bristly hair because it's a pain to have to scrub that off after you slit their throats so you can eat them. Right? So pigs get sunburn, and they're smart enough to know if they roll in the mud, it protects them from the sun. Why do pigs poop where they eat? Because we force them to. We keep them corralled up in small spaces. They don't have a, they don't want to do that. That's why they smell bad, because we force them to live in squalid conditions. Now, when you raise them as pets, like dogs, pigs have empathy for their owners, and they can recognize human faces and even emotion states just the same as dogs can. They can do tricks. They're over specified for different kinds of behavior, but they can do almost any trick that a dog can do, and a dog can do almost any trick. Cows and horses, if you were zipping around through space sampling animals, why wouldn't you think that the cow is a different developmental stage of the horse? So they're the same, they have virtually the same body plan and stature and load bearing capacity and intelligence and behavior. Have you met cows? You spent time with them? Like, I grew up in pastoral England. I've definitely met cows. They're friendly and they want to be scratched behind the ear. All mammals want to be scratched behind the ear, man. They love their children and they're afraid of the slaughterhouse. Ultimately, the difference between a dog and a pig is you intend to eat one. So there are two kinds of concepts, basically. Two ways of like encoding the world around you. One is thoughtfully and one is thoughtlessly, like by accident. Natural concepts are by accident. You cruise through the world, and in this world, we eat cows and pigs, and we keep horses and dogs, right? Horses and dogs are us, cows and pigs are them, right? Pigs and cows are food. In our country, pigs and cows are food. Horses and dogs are pets. Dogs and horses are us, pigs and cows are them. Possibly the most important question of the day is, who is us and who is them. And the ultimate difference, right? So the artificial or the formal definition is different. When you think about things intentionally, scientifically, abstract things into categories, use reason on abstractions, what you come up with is all of these are quadruped mammals, right? There's no moral difference between a dog and a pig. There's no moral justification for eating pigs but not dogs, for keeping dogs as pets and feeding pigs to the dogs, right? They're all biologically just about equidistant from people. All the stuff, pigs and dogs have similar levels of intelligence and empathy. And horses and cows all feel pain the same way, and they all love their children the same way. And when they're approaching the slaughterhouse and smelling the blood of the animals ahead of them in line, they all show the same stress and fear responses. Sometimes the more you know, the less rational the world seems. And you start to get confronted with moral choices you didn't expect. So I'm not going to tell anyone what to do. I'm just going to provide you all this information and then trust you make the right decision in the context that you experience that decision, which might not be the same decision I make. My decision is I don't eat mammals, right? If I'm not going to eat a dog, I don't feel like I should eat a pig. It doesn't make any sense. If they're basically the same animal, there's no reason to eat pigs but not dogs. So my choice is either to eat dogs or don't eat pigs, and I choose I don't eat pigs or cows. Now I try to avoid eating pigs and cows. It's not an absolute because we live in America, and sometimes that's the only food that you can eat. I'll eat birds because I don't want to die. Right? I tried doing completely vegetarian and I got really sick, probably from what I was eating to replace meat protein with plant protein. Something I couldn't identify made me really, really ill. I don't want to die. I won't die for birds. I'll eat chickens and stuff. And I know that's a moral compromise. The American Civil War. So we're tracking this argument, right? The us-them argument. In the American Civil War, it was sometimes literally brother against brother, right? Depending which side of the state line you lived on, you might be in an opposing army, and you might. There were cases this happened. Yeah, we were all Americans, and what happens is you volunteer or you get conscripted, and someone puts a musket in your hand and shows you how to use it. And they order you, wait until you see the whites of their eyes, because the musket range, the accuracy range of a musket is all loaded up and standing there and waiting, and one unit's advancing on another and one's waiting. And when you can recognize the facial features, that's about the accuracy range of a musket. And then we're all expected to line up and aim and fire. You've seen the movies. But what the leadership realized in the first skirmishes of the American Civil War is that only a small percentage, less than half of the soldiers, actually aimed the weapon at the enemy and pulled the trigger. And you go and you count discharges, like see who fired and who didn't. And so they started to observe people firing their weapon into the air, because when you can see the other person, other people, we're peaceful. Humans are. I know you watch the news, and especially now, and it doesn't seem that way, but humans are peaceful. It's very difficult actually to get a person to murder another person. It doesn't have it in us. on average. So, but then they're coming at you with bayonets and stuff, and you have a bayonet and a club basically, and you fight to defend yourself. But murder, you know, pointing a gun at a, it's complicated. It's complicated for people. So almost right away, we instituted basic military training. And some of that is following orders and marching in line and keeping your body clean and stuff, you know, keeping your locker locked and all that, whatever. But some of it is teaching you that the people you serve with are your brothers. We're not at the point of brothers and sisters yet. Maybe soon. The people you're serving with in the combat units are your brothers, and you'll die for them, and they'll die for you. That is beaten in. We give you a common enemy in the drill instructor, well, right, or the whoever, and we teach you, you know, the Marines, unit, corps, God, country, like that, in that order, and everyone else has their variations on that. The people you serve with are people, and everyone else kind of isn't. And then not only do we create what we call pseudo kinship bonds, where the people you are with are your family, we also have words for whoever is the enemy of the moment. I won't repeat them any. I won't repeat any of them now, but of course they're all ethnic slurs, right? We had words for the Germans in World War II and the Japanese in World War II, and the Vietnamese and the Koreans, and now the people in the Middle Eastern countries where we're fighting. We have special denigrating words that make them them and us us. Why? Because like a 30% fire rate is unacceptable for a military organization. Now we can get up close to that 100% fire rate. Progress. Slavery era. Black-white racism, as we know it in America, it's a relatively new invention. It's not quite uniquely American invention, but it is an American invention. Black-white racism is American. And then South Africa sort of took up the same thing. And this is, you know, these are the origins of black-white racism. Prior to the American system, look, in the first days of American slavery, Irish folk were treated essentially the same as Africans. They lived in the same quarters and were treated the same by the foreman. The difference being that piece of paper that would get you out of those conditions after you did your time. And Irish people had it, and African people didn't. And then African people could not blend. You couldn't just move and then join majority culture because skin can't take it off. Irish people could and just sort of anglicize. So in those first days, right, in the first slave revolts, African and Irish people revolted together. And the owners, the landowners, really quickly learned to give the Irish people just a tiny bump up in status over the African people, right? So we're not quartered together anymore, we're quartered separately, black and white and landowner. And the Irish people could move into the foreman positions, the African people never could. Just this little bit of difference, authority. Now you've got Irish indentures invested in the system, benefiting from the patriarchy. So that happens. prior to this, black-white racism, racism the way we talk about it, not so much. Prior to that, there's English people and everybody else, right? The English needed to justify their treatment of the Irish as well as their treatment of African slaves. So you have Oliver Cromwell storming into Ireland, and Oliver Cromwell just wants all of the land. How do you get people to aggress against people who are just like them? By teaching them they're not just like them. So here's some example of the various ways that we've justified treating people differently. And you'll see almost at the top of this wiki page um, drawings of facial prognathism. So white people, you know, the Roman face, really flat, and then they have the ape skulls and the like human ancestor skulls with what's called prognathism, where the nose of the jaw protrude. And what they're contending is that both Black Africans and the Irish have this primitive facial feature, the Anglo or white skull's black, indicating that they're primitive and stupid and need to be ruled and governed. You just have the African face, I think, on this particular site, but I've seen the medical text, you know, the 17 and 1800s medical text. So yeah, scientific racism, that's a thing that happened. And the contemporaneous writings, you know, the plantation owners at the time, stating that Negroes don't feel pain. You have to hit them especially hard because they're unresponsive and they don't love their children, and they're strong and they're tireless. When they fall down after 4 hours work and no water, when they fall down, they're just like children and they need to be beaten until they stand up again. And we get into the archaeology. We're in the Caribbean here. We get into the archaeology and we find people dead at age 18 or 19 or 22, worked literally to death, right? Arthritis all the way through their bodies and marks on the bones of almost continuous whipping. Why would we tell ourselves these stories about people that they don't experience pain the same way that we do, and they don't love their children? Because you intend to take their children away as property, and you intend to work them literally to death. Not to put too fine a point on it, because like pigs and dogs, we intended to eat them. Not to literally consume their flesh, but to consume their labor. It's just easier to beat someone if you can tell yourself they're not like you. And again, so there are these racist movements to say, like, I'm Irish and my ancestors were slaves too, and we got over it, just get over it. But of course, the line is skin color, right? There's a counter movement to say Irish were never treated like slaves. Absolutely, Irish were treated just like slaves were, except for that one thing, that indenture. That indenture, man, it could get lost. You don't have that piece of paper at the end of your indenture, or the management has lost it or something. And there absolutely are cases, and even free Irish people were treated so disposably, and so were Chinese and Native American. But that line, right, that line is that Irish could blend and Black people never could. Right? People with dark skin or certain facial features never could. We escaped. Just one more note on this. Gone with the Wind, an American favorite. Incredibly racist. Incredibly racist. The Lost Cause is this ongoing justification for the Civil War. that from the Southern side, the war was a war of Northern aggression, and it was about states' rights and overstepping on the part of the federal authorities and all this stuff. Dude, it was about slavery, right? And contemporaneously, um, white plantation owners, I don't know if they thought it, but they certainly said it, that Negroes needed white people, this manifest destiny. Um, Without the benevolent guidance of people who look like me, Negro people, dark-skinned people would be sort of sad and shiftless with the end of slavery. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves, and they just sit around and not have the intelligence or drive to accomplish anything. And if you actually watch Gone with the Wind, this is exactly the story. The Southern lifestyle is gone. And everyone's sad about it, including the now free former slave. Incredibly racist. So this is the rule in, rule out problem. And I'll let you decide what to make of it. I'm not primarily a moral philosopher. I'm a scientist. But there are serious moral questions here. The way we do science, the way we do it, is so that we can't pick and choose our definitions to suit us, right? And when I say what is consciousness, that's what you want to do. You want to rule yourself in, you want to rule everything else out, and that is incredibly dangerous and destructive, right? Even now, like you have joined a religion or something, and you go, I know the truth, and you need to wake up. Everyone's equally awake, man. We're all doing the best we can. Stop it. So this is the problem with defining consciousness. Um, Other beings are a lot more conscious than you want to give them credit for. Yeah, even chickens, and dogs, and cats, and cows, and pigs, and boll weevils, and plants. A lot more conscious than you want to give them credit for. The other half of the equation is you are a lot less conscious than you want to believe. The sentience thing, it's not real, man. So here's just two examples. Again, these are, this one at least is based on a bunch of scientific papers. And this one's actually a stage magician, but we've I've given you this one for amusement factor. We've done the experiment, hundreds of times with very simple results. There's a billion other ways that you're just not as conscious as you think you are. You're making most of your choices with your limbic system, not with your frontal lobes, okay? So choice blindness, asking people why they made a decision. They usually don't know why they made a decision, right? They made it deep in their brain where they don't have access to that information. And they're using their frontal lobes just to rationalize the decision. And then change blindness. You just don't have that much cognitive bandwidth. And so when you're asked to focus on one thing, you sort of defocus on all the other things. And this looks like a cruel trick to do this to people. Get them to not realize the person they're talking to has been switched off with an entirely different person. They look really foolish. But this is a strength, not a weakness, the ability to focus on the salient factors of the environment and trust that reality doesn't do this to us. That's really good. It's good for people. Okay. You're just not as conscious as you want to believe. So finally, we get to this definition of consciousness that looks a lot like a layperson would throw out there, right? Consciousness is the awareness of internal and external stimuli, period. Full stop, as we'd say in English. There it is. That unfortunately rules in all kinds of stuff you don't want ruled in. And it frequently rules you out. But that's how science works. We formally define things, and then We don't change the definition to suit our purposes. That's called equivocation. It's a logical error and sometimes a rhetorical trick. And then we operationalize the definitions, like in the for this science purpose, what I mean by X word is Y definition measured with Z instruments, right? You score a 70 or above on this instrument, and you have this property. And that's the rule, okay? And then the chips kind of fall where they fall. Does all this make you uncomfortable? Good. I'm not here to make you comfortable. Science is about feeling good, man. Science is about what's true, factual, finding out about that reality we're so separated from by the veil of the senses. Oh, that's perception. We'll get to that in this chapter. Right? The truth is, if you're never uncomfortable in these classes, you're not doing it right. You're not learning anything. Literally not learning anything. So, like every week, we're going to mention this word, reification. Remember this? Reification is treating concepts, abstractions, as real things in the world with definite properties. Remember, there are no triangles, there is no coastline of Britain, and there's no such thing as consciousness, so don't take it so seriously. Okay. Last note, we used to talk about, for example, being asleep as being unconscious. And Freud was into the unconscious and subconscious mind. We'll get into those ideas a little later, but like being asleep or drugged, it might not be useful to say unconscious anymore. That's just not as useful as it used to be. Why? Well, because by the definition, if a thing responds to a stimulus, then it's conscious, right? It's aware of the stimulus. And sleeping people respond to stimuli. If you were unconscious when your alarm clock went off, it wouldn't trouble you. You wouldn't wake up. I know half the people, you're like, I slept through my own. Yeah. Maybe you are unconscious and you have a medical problem. Maybe you should drink less. Think about that. I know there's other reasons. I'm being provocative on purpose. I apologize. Yeah, people have dreams, right? And if I play a noise and then wait until I can measure that you're dreaming and then wake you up, you're often dreaming about the noise that I made. Half the time your alarm clock's going off and you're having a dream about an alarm clock and staying asleep, right? You're still responding to this. So instead, these days, we tend to talk about altered states of consciousness. And instead of being unconscious, you're in an altered state of consciousness. And there's three major categories for this, which is going to be sleep, drugs, and hypnosis. And those will be future lectures. Thank you for your kind attention. That's it for this